This profession that is, because even as I started my journey into all of this, I emphasized design as the core answer to why a lot of things happen the way they do. And so
Oh yeah,
I haven't given up on that principle and thought, well, these are still the very critical stakeholders in any project, right? For how things actually happen, how clients move forward, and what you're planning to do next. So design
yeah.
always stayed like, yeah, forefront on that.
I would say that maybe the architect is like entrance door towards actually building something, because the one of the first people you speak with if you want to build something is actually an architect who needs to translate your demands and wishes into something that later is have the full chain of like steps who do what. So yeah, we're
Yeah.
one of the first points of contact.
For sure. In fact, what I've seen a lot in terms of the role, and not to segue it too much, but I've seen how sometimes the portrayal of the term architect is sometimes it comes with this very like biased connotation. And so like the weight of the term becomes a little bit too overstated in some regards, to where I've seen some articles where they kind of put a narrative that the positioning becomes more of a spatial designer. And so, like, when we think
Okay.
about spatial design in general as a function, it kind of like it collapses a more, but a more variety of like things you look into. But I thought it was a nice framing for the modern day consideration for what does an architect mean. And it's not like just your floor plan delivery person, right? It's like
Yeah, yeah.
it's actually a lot more intricate. So like I like the spatial designer kind of like positioning because it felt more and collapsing
Uh,
and yeah, it was kind of interesting.
I can tell you how I see the role after I don't know for 14 years being an architect. It's
Yeah.
I will if I need to use one word, I would say translator.
Exactly. And what's funny is that it's the same language too, right?
Yeah,
It's yeah, exactly, 100%. Well, why are we here? That's because since we met, actually, we both are in the space of addressing gaps that we find with how building products work in this profession, this complex thing that we call, development, real estate development, building delivery, project delivery. It comes in so many phrases, right? But fundamentally, we've seen certain friction points, but more importantly, we're also evolving in time right now, right? Like we are in a point in time where like changes that are happening and how one discovers a building product is also kind of stretching further than what how things have been as they continue to exist, right? But it keeps adding on to. So we'll definitely be exploring some of that as well. Um, but Marco, feel free to share, tell me a little bit more. So Lucid AI, share a little bit more about how this got started and sort of what the general glimpse of things look like today.
yeah. I would say the whole story started 3 years ago, and basically from my own frustration. I was fed up of being an architect, and I decided I need something to change in my career where I would merge like my two passions, which is architecture and construction on one side, and tech and the latest in tech on the other. And
Hmm.
coincidentally, it happened when the GPT model, the first one, was released in like
Okay.
2000 end of 2022.
Yeah.
So I was thinking like maybe I should seize the this opportunity and actually try to build something. And the first idea was trying to automate floor plans and visualizations,
Okay.
basically to build that translator between the client and the architect, and the tool that will be like a mediator
Mm.
between the wishes. And of course, it was super early. The tool sucked. It wasn't that good enough.
Back then,
But
yeah, we're talking about, but I mean,
yeah,
still, the idea for the idea to originate because you saw the path towards that is key there, actually. But sure,
yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that's one of the most painful processes to translate clients' wishes into something that is according to law, and it is that's something that it can be actually built.
yeah,
And we started interviewing architects, and everyone hated it because they were
right,
thinking like, "Hey, don't steal the fun part of our job." And points taken, which is the creative stuff. And
yeah,
everyone told us like, help us with the repetitive tasks, with the laws, with
yeah,
those kind of things that we hate. So we
yeah,
quickly like pivoted from that idea, try to build the AI who understands the laws. And at that point we were in Germany, and Germany with the bureaucracy and laws in architecture and construction is a nightmare
Mm,
because every federal unit, and there is like a 16 in Germany, is
yeah.
different, and you can't. And if you are building a software, you will probably be highly focused on Germany, and you can't scale outside of the borders because it's the next country and next set of laws. So what we
Mm,
saw is like, okay, we can build this. We built a tool that understands a vast amount of documents,
mm-hmm.
but we couldn't actually apply it. And what we realized when we did research that in European Union, around 60% of the architects are one-man show. So like a
Yeah.
lot of people just having their own small shop, and they just don't care about extra software. So business wise, it wasn't that like a lucrative decision.
Mm-hmm.
But when we started digging deeper, we realized that the second tier where the architects are struggling is finding a proper material. Like I come to
Yeah.
the website of a manufacturer and
Yeah.
I'm welcomed by hundreds of PDFs, certifications, charts, tables, and it just like a big, massive amount of time wasted on trying to figure out what's the best fit for a specific building, for a specific certificate, fire protection,
All
and
those, yeah, stand
yeah, and at the moment
requirements
it's
there.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
at the moment it's pretty rudimentary. I call their guys, they tell me, yeah, you can fit that door, or I go on a website and download PDFs,
Yeah.
which is if you are like squeezed with the deadlines and time, what we discovered is architect just copy paste from previous project some door or a window and like, yeah, I said my time and that's it. That's
Yeah.
the practice.
Yeah.
And we slowly evolved towards the building material manufacturers. And when we started interviewing them, we discovered that the pain is even bigger than we actually had assumptions. And this is how we
Mm-hmm.
ended up helping building material manufacturers, especially their sales and tech support team, actually access every single information.
Yeah.
And from that information, learn where they have knowledge gaps, where people are struggling, so our tool can help them out and actually close those gaps.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, it's that interaction piece, right? As you mentioned there,
Yes.
that becomes key. And we just put up the segues here in the segments that we're to cover today.
Mm-hmm.
But primarily, this is a perfect segue for how we're to start, which is that this fundamental piece of actually the call you just mentioned, right? Even I work
Yep.
with a handful of manufacturers, and what I notice in how we do feedback iterations together is that they keep mentioning that they'll have all the information on their website, but they'll still get calls pretty much asking the exact same questions.
Yes.
And sometimes you would think, well, why this duplicate effort and things like that? But you then realize really quickly it's really just about trust. Like it's fundamentally that they want to know there's another person behind the line on that side that knows what they're talking about, so they can, build that trust from there. And so, like, seeing very much right now that the technical know-hows become like the thing that you want to be really fast about because you want to get faster to that section or phase of, okay, now I got to know if, this is a real team and we can trust them for this thing that they have, which sounds great, and how we can then, actually implement it in the project. So let's talk about that a bit, right? Because maybe the narrative to some is like, oh, well, we don't care about people having a chatbot because they're going to talk to us anyway. And then you'll realize, well, there are just all those many ways in which people like to work. So as a
Yep.
manufacturer, your goal, as even and in some ways you are in the service business too, right? Because you're there to serve your client and help them find the right thing for their project. And
Yep.
so you have to be very adaptive to realizing, well, the behavior under which people will explore will vary, and the more modalities they can offer, the better, right? And so
Agreed.
in this case, we're talking about in this case these kinds of inquiries and things like that. So as we talk about trust, and as you iterated and have worked also on your end, right, with a handful of projects, what's kind of been your observation around that very piece of still giving a call, but they have this very like precise chat interaction that lets them understand. And it's not even about just the chat interaction, right? But it's about the product information. So share a little bit about that. Like, what does that trust building process really look like in this world of better accuracy?
I would say that you are pretty right regarding relationship building, like especially between the architect on one side and a sales rep of that company that sells the materials or produce building materials.
Yeah,
And there is always like an architect who say, "Hey, I know a Mike who is around and covering this area for sales for let's say Marvin Windows," and for them it's easier to just do a call and actually ask the question that is probably 2 clicks away on some PDF,
yeah,
but it's just faster. The second tier that we discovered is like sending the half-baked email where an architect just takes a screenshot of their, let's say, Revit and put it in the email and write, "Hey, can I fix your window with this kind of insulation or something like that?" That's also like a second tier. And
yeah,
when we interviewed the sales and tech support people within the companies that produce material, they were like, "We are losing a lot of time on basically similar questions, just phrased differently from like 10 various people." Or, for example, and what we discovered also is that the knowledge is siloed inside of head of sales or
yeah,
senior people who are doing sales or tech support.
yeah,
And they are often interrupted by their colleagues internally, then interrupted by outside, whether it's an architect or a contractor.
yeah,
And they were really, really frustrated because they can't focus on closing deals outside because they're often interrupted inside by media or junior colleagues. And this is one of the things that we discovered how big, when we start digging layers deep, how big that problem is,
yeah,
especially if the knowledge base is all over the place.
yeah.
So if you don't have a structured knowledge base, that's a mess.
And I'm even right now thinking of this from the other perspective too, which is from, let's say, the design team and let's say a library that a firm has in terms of like materials they may be used in a past project or materials that they're still looking into. And sort of like that knowledge management environment applies very much on that side, just as much as it does for manufacture, right?
Oh, definitely.
And we'll talk more about those internal use cases because I think that was a very interesting thing where in some ways you would think, oh, that seems very obvious, but it's only obvious at hindsight, right? Because then you start
Yeah.
realizing really how every team works differently. And
Oh,
and
yeah,
so
definitely.
yeah, and actually maybe let's talk a little bit about this aspect of every team working differently from the standpoint of how certain brands, are known for certain interactions. Like when we talk
Okay.
about, uh, certain new product lines, let's say by a manufacturer that's well known.
Okay.
And in that case, a lot of them, know them for a certain reputation on like quality or what to expect from them, or maybe some have like a nice quirk around their warranty and sort of like how is the post-installation interaction kind of thing. And
Mhm.
so that's one thing there that gets interesting. So in this component of trust building, how do you see brands kind of and manufacturers in general kind of adapt to that aspect of how they reinforce what their kind of DNA is for how they are as a manufacturer and how they, kind of share that stuff through their material? Is that an angle you've kind of seen?
I would say that aftercare is the thing that is actually building the proper relationship. Like after the product is implemented, let's say if it's maybe already implemented into architectural drawing,
Hmm.
uh, this kind of aftercare, like talking with them, asking if they can be helpful, providing maybe already done like one pagers or similar that is covering, let's say, energy efficiency, like
Hmm.
being there for them, anticipating some questions is where you will get the architect to call you every single time because they will just be loyal to your brand. This is for me also like because you are not selling your product, you are trying to sell the long-term relationship with architectural studio.
Yeah.
And like when we speak with the salespeople from the companies, they're working with an architect for 20 years.
Hmm.
And that person is loyal to their death. Like they will not switch because somebody is cheaper, more better. they will just like go with one person, probably on a speed dial on the business phone, and like have them for life for every single building. And I would say that is like the aftercare part, the after sell care part
Yeah.
is what brings the money in, not just like you sold something and that's it.
Yeah. Well, fundamentally, that even comes back to a bit of that narrative of why do we keep building the same way and things like that. A lot of these behavior are entrenched, and like as a result, we end up with these kind of circumstances. But it's not fundamentally about that, but it just becomes about that ease of working, right? Like at the end of the day, we're all humans, we're all trying to do our best work, and every time we try to improve. But when it comes to these interactions, we want to have the most seamless thing, because at the end humans work with other humans in this instance, right? And so
Yes,
like it becomes about, well, the pleasure of the work ends up being in that relationship right? And so like that's why the investment in that goes heavily. But
I can give you an example how one
sure.
company did that in Germany.
All right.
uh,
Yeah.
that's a Loro, it's Loro, and
Okay.
those guys are building a product for rain drainage from the roofs, and like everything regarding drainage.
Okay.
And in my like a 3.5 years of working as an architect in Germany, in every single project, there was just a Loro company. Like you have tons of different ones.
Yeah.
They just did it. And when I ask, okay, why? There is always a guy when you have a problem who will come to your office the same day or tomorrow, and they will literally sit next to you and
Yeah.
tell you, yeah, this is the product you should put on this roof because it has, I don't know, X amount of square foot of the surface, and
Yeah.
combine that with the rain calculation. This is the one. They know it by heart.
Yeah.
And for me, that was like, of course, they don't want to change anybody else. They're like a white glove treatment, and that's it.
Yeah. And actually, you bring up a very good point, which is sometimes what I see is can become like the reluctance, if you will, of like adopting more tech because maybe a company is invested in that service aspect to where they would much rather double down on the, let's say, experience they have in interacting with their team than on the tech side of stuff. But sometimes not really, right? Like sometimes it's more about investing in both. So maybe in that particular example, as we're talking about even the information a team has, in this case, you mentioned some calculations too. And I noticed that quite a bit in terms of how different teams will have different capabilities. And that's the
Mhm.
whole point of hiring consultants on a project, because one is an expert maybe on the energy modeling, someone else with load calcs, things like that. Um, a whole different conversation. Maybe that'll be for Stepan to take over in terms of the how the tools are evolving, that side of
Yeah.
things, right? Which is a real conversation for sure. And but you're talking about this kind of interaction and then the data that just sits there. So before we even, for the stream that we're doing, we were talking a bit about sort of what you go through teams in terms of preparing their information. So share a little bit more about sort of how that happened in terms of a team finding out that the way they were organizing to date was maybe not the way they thought they should have been doing. What happened there?
Well, I would say that companies now need to think about preparing their data for the AI age.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that every single member of the company needs to learn from scratch. It is just keep in mind thinking how you store your documentation,
Hmm.
because that depends how good your AI OS operating system of the company would work.
Yep.
And we actually, one of the questions when we talked regarding the pricing to offer our product to a company is one of our questions is how structured is your data? Because here's what can happen. If your marketing department is producing catalogs and any other collateral, and there is another spring promotion, and they create yet another catalog with the same product but slightly different information, and you
Hmm.
figure out you have a duplicate that one is now obsolete, and you try to cram everything into AI, you will just create noise and probably not that much correct information.
Yeah.
So having it everything structured and properly labeled. Like you can't call your document final of the final of the draft
Every file
point
lives
two.
that way at some point.
Yeah, yeah,
But
like
yes,
you need to
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
yeah, you need to say like, okay,
Yeah.
this document is certification lead gold, for example.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you put yourself in the shoes of the AI, it's the same. If somebody share with you like a SharePoint or any other like shared folder, and you enter it, and it's just pure naming chaos with a tons of duplicates, you
Yeah.
will also struggle to find the information, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah,
This
tell
is
me about it.
basically
Yeah.
Yeah, this is basically how you need to think if your company is ready for the AI age. That's a like a big step before actually even thinking about implementing AI.
Yeah. And actually, I think you bring up a very good point there where I think we need to unfold that a little bit more. And that is on why marketing might start positioning the same product in different ways. And even when here we're talking about like this interaction that happens, say from a cold interaction, right? Where someone maybe just somehow let's and this can happen. I've myself I try to like, eat my own dog food or like dog food what
Yep.
you're doing kind of thing. And I try to use AI, all sorts of different modalities and tools that exist today, but to see how does it perceive or understand, let's say, project requirements for a kind of product that I might be looking for and how it will fetch up or pop up results based on what it needs. So in this case, let's say I'm working in a jurisdiction that has this fire rating, it's for this kind of like has to comply with these like regulations, as you pointed out earlier. You use these in your search criteria, right? And
Correct.
when you end up kind of discovering that, oh, a certain manufacturer pops up, or maybe a marketplace sometimes pops up. I've seen that happen quite a bit too, which tells me a little bit more about what work is happening by all other companies on all other ends for how they can populate an AI search results. But, for a manufacturer at least, the marketing standpoint of things becomes very integrated into that product positioning, right? And so, like, how do you kind of suggest also that, and maybe this is the point that maybe we don't have the answer to right now, but maybe we can help surface the aspect that the positioning you care for at this point in time is more important than the positioning that maybe the product used in the past kind of related to. Because there might be some nuance for why today your product maybe has like four core advantages, right? And
Hmm.
in the past, maybe the two that you kept using then were actually more relevant, but now maybe it's the other three or the other two, right? That the combination is different for how it makes it stand out. And so like how marketing teams adapt to those realities based on what you're looking for, I think becomes a part of how you document information or create metadata rather for a
Yep.
product and its product line, right? So yeah, yeah,
No, I just want to say, and I'm smiling because marketing team loves to create a flashy, nice catalogs. Like
sure.
we are having a launch of the product, which is amazing. But for me as an architect or a contractor, I need ease of use and I need quickly to find information in that catalog.
Yeah.
I don't care about people like a family on a photo smiling under bright blue sky and enjoying their new window.
That maybe was an
I
inspiration for the render later on, but you take it for the grain of salt. But sure,
Of
yeah.
course, of course. But like, if
Yeah,
you are actually trying to solve your problem, I
yeah,
want to find a fire rating in like 10 seconds
yeah,
and actually implement your product. Like, so
sure.
that means that I don't care about stock photos and other things.
Yeah,
So maybe marketing people should think from the point of view, how can I make as easily accessible a certain information in
yeah,
this catalog?
yeah,
What, like, we are launching the new line, why is it different, and how to find those points quickly so I can, as
yeah,
an architect, understand, oh, this makes sense, it can make energy efficiency like even higher. I would think about how to implement it.
yeah. I mean, fundamentally, though, my earlier works in this space and trying to understanding this challenge of why are we adopting materials the way we are and things like that kind of goes back to that very point, which is that how you see that material live in your project is more important than anything else. And the faster you can get to contextualizing that, the easier things are. Which is why at the time I just kept thinking that, first of all, why is BIM not as prolific as it should be? And we're
Yep.
talking only like 4 years ago, which, it's it kind of tells you a little bit about things. But and in that sense, it was also about like, well, and how come these materials are just so hard to your point of translation? This is a different kind of translation when you want to let computers talk to their own different tools for how they should
Yep.
communicate a certain geometric, render of whatever you're trying to like visualize there. Not to
Yep.
mention level of detail and things like that. But yeah, it gets down to that exact point. And so we are at that case right now, right? Where like that is the North Star is how well can we contextualize a given building product in the actual project that the person is reaching out to. Um,
Yep.
and so maybe that brings us a little bit to that point of manufacturers actually working with their own documentation and the clients that they work with. So let's kind of work into that, and that kind of falls into that internal use case discovery that you basically mentioned. So
Mhm.
share a little bit about that. How did that kind of like surface in that regards?
You mean how we came up to the focus on the internal use case?
Sure. Well, yeah, let's contextualize it a little bit more from the standpoint that it's still a valid use case that it's about the inquiries you get and having a good structured data backed by the actual product information that someone can ask about the product and get the correct information, right? Like just to clear that out, the more it's not about the structured piece is more about how the question reinforces the answer for what
Mhm.
is the right answer for that given product based on, say, for example, to that point earlier, I need to have this fire rating for this kind of door, and the door frame needs to be so and so, right? If we're talking about doors, for example. And
Yep.
and and so the realization is that when someone reaches out, is that even the team internally sometimes maybe isn't too confident in what that product information is, and they have to look it up, right? And get the person the right information. Because I mean, your point being to earlier, and we didn't mention this just yet, but the context of how much experience one has in the team and the company that they're with. There will always
Mhm.
be that period where maybe they have a new hire or someone who's recently been onboarded. They're in that very kind of like curve of like they're learning very fast, right? They're keeping up with as much as they can to get to that 15-year experienced person within hopefully 2 years, if not less. The ideal is that it happens on day one, but we know certain things don't happen on
Um,
day one. But
of course.
but I think that also comes down to like why even someone is looking for that function with that manufacturer. I think there's something happening there too, to where some people find an attraction towards a certain division for a reason. Like the world of windows and the world of doors are really their own worlds, right? In
Yep.
terms of how they function.
Yep.
But to that point on internal use case, so someone tries to keep up or get up to speed with what their actual product information is. What does that really look like in that
Yep.
dynamic? You know,
And I can also like draw the parallel with training the AI.
you know,
It's very similar. So it doesn't matter if you're a junior, a young person, or you're a senior person coming from a different material sector.
yeah,
So if you are, let's say, a junior who just started the sales role, or if you are an experienced salesperson, let's stick with the sales part. From
sure,
let's say roofing manufacturer, and you are switching to door and window manufacturer. What is like a current state is that they give you like a manual with the catalogs, and you need to ramp up, and you need to learn that, and you need to actually understand the dynamics, and you will probably like get from other team members, some people who are already converted as a buyers, and you start building relationship. And
hmm,
this is similar with the AI. We need to give them the catalog, which is tons of PDFs of pages of the product information, and
yeah,
it needs to ramp up. The only difference is the AI can ramp up in like a couple of days. And what we discovered with manufacturers is that from 6 to 12 months, often sometimes even more, the ramp up period is because it's just too many products.
Hmm.
And each product has like their own variations of the same, let's say, window, and
Yeah.
each variation has a documentation. And
Yeah.
it's not normal to know everything by heart. What you know is like the Pareto principle. You probably know like a 20% most frequently asked questions and situations,
Yeah.
and everything else can be like an edge case. And
Yep.
you need to like, okay, I will get back to you. I need to figure that out.
Yeah.
So if documentation where a physical person needs to take it to learn it is messy, you will get untrained person pretty fast, you know.
Yeah.
And this is where the parallels with training AI and training a proper person comes. It's literally the same process. The only
Yeah.
thing is that the speed of learning is exponentially, like insanely faster.
Yeah. And I think that speaks a lot also for what expectations people have for how they like to work. I mean, we have to face that reality that is, I was listening to a podcast just recently where I think they were a team from Microsoft, and they were basically just talking about their engineers where you take their AI away and they'll just tell you that they don't want to go to work anymore,
Yep,
because like it gets to that point where it's an expectation at this point too that as a manufacturer, you actually have these systems in place, and you're not like maybe asking the new person to be like, okay, now print out your modules, or and
yep,
so in that sense, it becomes a very core component then to just like the dynamics of working, right? And like that's just a standard at this point that your information lives a tap away. And can we talk a little bit more about also just the nature of how we input information? Like we use our keyboards to type in. We also sometimes use our voice to, speech
yes,
to text has gotten very good lately, even though
yep,
sometimes it really feels like it's pulling words out of its own its own
yes,
dictionary. But I think that goes back to the model. So little shout out to Whisper here for being one
yeah,
of the best the best models I've seen, especially locally too. So you don't have to
yep.
always be wired. But yeah, and so it gets to that aspect of the modalities too, in which you interact with that information.
Let me just give one
Yeah,
one comment before we switch the topic.
yeah,
For me, it was an amazing comment from head of commercial sales at one company in the States
uh-huh,
who said, "I would rather offset all my product knowledge to the AI so I can focus on building relationships."
yeah,
So that's the thing that AI can't automate.
yeah,
Like, I want to know when, let's say, your son's birthday is. Like this kind of evolving relationships over the years with
yeah,
the specific companies is what can't be replaced. The
absolutely.
knowledge base can
Yeah,
be basically outsourced. Like you will remember everything like a frequently
yeah,
asked questions, situations.
yeah,
Everything else you can just pull out your phone or a laptop and ask our AI who's trained on your product data, and you just give it.
yeah. I mean,
That's one comment that we got.
yeah, no, I mean, fundamentally that, and it gets to be very, it is just critical that even then the job function becomes that. I even
Yeah.
realized myself like, w- and this is kind of going to like because it is fundamentally about human psychology. Like no matter how we
Yes.
want to put the work as being something that has its inputs and outputs, and it might be zero or one, there is that gray area that is the human component. And
Yes.
uh, uh, on some other conversation, it was just very, fundamentally, the act of designing and constructing structures is a rather human act, because fundamentally it's about shaping spaces that serve a certain function for its intended
Yes.
occupants. And so like yeah, it goes into that for sure. Now I can't speak for data centers as what kind of
Yeah.
entity that is there. That's a different kind of of sympathy, if you will, for the machines. Stay cool,
Yep.
machines. That's the key part here. We don't want them to burn out. Let's put it that way.
Of
Um,
course.
but it fundamentally gets to that human relationship piece, and to the point on introversion and extroversion, right? I think
Hmm.
that moving forward too, there will be this very interesting balance to where we become even more introspective with what are the functions that we liked. Because I can think of many examples. I myself have interacted with some manufacturers that are in larger size where because they're so much bigger, they end up with team dynamics where you'll have your computer people, right? However, they like to be phrased as being someone who's like in the back office all the time, or like they don't really interact with clients versus those who do.
Yep.
So maybe share what's your point of view on that. And actually, I'm more so about like even learning from your point of view there, which is how is that dynamic evolving a bit more, where maybe it gets to the point where you're in a company where that person who was like just so good at using Windows, or like they figured out how to do stuff. Now AI kind of does all these things, and like their job function, obviously, there's at any given point they could do more work. But how do we shift this portrayal to where, well, we're now in the business of building better relations? How do we shift into that? How are you seeing that dynamic merge?
Yep. I would say, let's say you have 100% of, if you're a salesperson, you have 100% of, let's say, your attention span in your work shift. At the
Yeah,
moment, it's a mixture of trying to memorize a lot of stuff regarding the products, like
yeah,
information.
yeah,
Then there is a second part where you are accessing information that you don't know immediately.
yeah,
Then the third step is like contacting tech support to help you out, or ask somebody senior. And then there is a relationship building part. And
yeah,
everything is crammed in like 100% of attention percent points, let's say.
yeah. That makes sense.
What
Yeah,
is what is the next step is actually trying to use majority of your 100% of attention to talking with people, understanding them, and doing actual sales, then pulling somebody off, hey, can you help me with this for 5 minutes, or going to the tech support team or customer support to help you out. Like
yeah,
that part can be with the AI automated. So
yeah,
basically almost 100% or points of your attention can be focused on closing more deals, warming cold leads,
yeah,
and like actually building those relationships that can bring you money in decades, not like just a quick win.
yeah,
And this is how I see the shift is going to be. And this is actually a good stuff because digging through the information, salespeople don't like that part. They love to go on a lunch, talk with the contractor, explain how they can like sell them the X amount of materials, create quotas, and so on.
yeah,
And this is where actually in our industry, besides trade shows, of course, how the deals are done. It's a handshake, it's in person, and that's where the 100% or 100 points should
yeah,
be mainly spent.
yeah.
Everything else can be automated.
Yeah. And that plays a big role actually in kind of like be where the customer is kind of thing. And
Correct.
so like to your point earlier about like where are the places where someone is like in that mindset of making a decision because they're working on a project or they're thinking for future projects. And so yeah, it
Yes.
gets into that component for sure. As you were mentioning that, what kind of came to mind as well was I mean the relationship building aspect of things ends up being to that point where is that fine line between product information and the interaction that you're expecting to receive, I guess. Because like your point of attention reminds me of more the act of like context switching.
Hmm.
And so like there's this author Cal Newport.
Oh
He's
yeah.
been kind of yep all over the place with a lot of stuff, and actually it's pretty cool to see that he's doing like the masterclass stuff now too. But
Oh, okay.
he talks a lot about this the science really that goes behind how we pay attention to things, and how this very dynamic world of like constant attention switching kind of causes a thing that actually reduces the efficiency we have. And so I kind of like this a lot in terms of that. So all I can maybe reinforce is that aspect that context shifting is not supposed to be normal, is the
Oh
point.
no.
And so like the idea is that these technologies allow us, as much as they are kind of everywhere and they do all these things, it actually helps us get back to that sort of like more hyper-focused attention to like a certain task or project initiative without having much context shifting. So it kind of changes also how we operate as a team, right? In that sense.
Well, here's how can I maybe give an example. It's
Hmm.
nobody thinks in a total amount of context switching. Let's call it like that.
Yeah,
Let's say you are on the construction site. You are a salesperson, and you don't know the answer to the question that person asked you.
yeah,
How it is done at the moment, you will either say, "Yeah, we'll get back to you," or you will probably want to do a quick fix. So while you are still at the construction site or at the reseller or whatever, you will call somebody within the company or your colleague. That means even though it's maybe a 5 minutes call, that means that you like interrupted that person, and to that for that person to get back on what they did,
yeah,
there's also like a 5, 10, 15 minutes.
yeah,
And that's like a interrupting with and I often hear that especially from senior people, they often get phone calls from their colleagues. Hey, quick question, I need you for 5 minutes.
yeah,
That's never 5 minutes, you know.
yeah,
And that's and yet when you compound that, how much of the time of a senior commercial sales or head of sales or VP of sales is
yeah,
spent on quick question
yeah,
versus his actual work. And
yeah,
when you compound that by division, let's say North division of specific company, that's a lot of hours
yeah,
spent and equal money
yeah.
spent on quick questions.
100%. Yeah, fundamentally. I mean, that's exactly what it is, right? It's that
Yep.
information access. It comes at a cost, and at this point, we're not even measuring currency. I mean, our currency that we're measuring is time. And so
Yes.
fundamentally at that point it's a time thing. Um and actually to that point, not that we're not oblivious to it, but voice agents, voice interactions in general by machines, we've seen now they've become very good at being the uncanny
Yes.
valley has been crossed. The other day I
Yes.
was doing something with insurance. It was AI, but it was an AI I have never interacted with before in the sense of how information retrieval was happening. And what I find very interesting is that the voice agent stuff can sometimes be very risky too, right? Because you might not have I mean, that's the part where maybe we can briefly discuss is what does
Mhm.
human in the loop actually mean for those interactions where maybe one decides to implement a voice agent of some kind or some kind of voice interaction to enable more modalities, back to that point of modalities. So what
Mhm.
are your points of view on that regard?
Well, as you said, like AI voice agent can be liable if they make mistake or hallucinate,
Yeah,
but also the person can be too. So that's also one of the things. The other thing is having
yeah,
human in the loop regarding the voice that happens super fast. I'm not sure how quickly human in the loop can intervene and help. Like, of course, there is always a situation where the AI agent says, "Hey, at the moment, I don't have answer to that question. Do you want me to connect you with a real person?" This means, from the other side, if you look from a human perspective, that means that I can handle 20 AI agents and have one dashboard where I can see, hey, this is escalated to me, and I can take over, which
yeah,
means that I'm technically multiplying myself with the knowledge base, and I'm basically handling the team.
yeah,
So this is where I think the biggest human in the loop value can be created,
yeah,
where you are handling a team of AI agents, and only when it's escalated, you are there to take the call and actually continue. And you already have the context because the voice
exactly.
agent can transcribe what they spoke with the customer, and then you just take over and actually finish the job or close the deal.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's exactly what it gets down to, is the idea that the transcription ends up having a lot of information. In my experience with that insurance company, actually, what I noticed was And I can relate this back to a few weeks ago. Well, has it been? Well, it's been a month now. Time flies. But about a month
Yeah.
ago, a month ago, I was at this kind of like a developer meetup thing, and there were it was Google was there as well. And they were talking about like how you build agents, and they were
Mhm.
talking about like agent cards and things like that. And what was very clear is that there is a lot to limiting how much an agent has access to. And that kind of brings back, and this is more just to leave like an open thought, which is to realize that AI at the end of the day is based on inference. And inference
Mhm.
as a function is sort of to like even how I guess our brains kind of try to go and recollect memory from all these like different chambers that we have, right? But obviously the amazingness that is the human brain is still leaps and leaps beyond in terms of how it organizes things in that sense. But in terms of how the machine understands things, it's actually less is more kind of thing. And so I think
Yes.
that that's sort of like again to your point on like preparing for data and preparing that information, right? The less is more is becomes the key component.
Yes.
And I guess that's a lot of how you even probably want people to get started is to have that mindset of it's not necessarily about volume, it's definitely about quality, but
Yes.
adjusting that right balance. So I mean, as we get closer to the end here, I'd definitely love to get started into that. So, what does getting started with Lucid look like in that sense?
So when we speak with the companies, how we work so far. So if
Yeah,
you're in a traditional business and you are a small startup, oftentimes they ask you for 20, 30, 50 references, which at the moment when you're starting, you don't have that much. That's one thing. The other thing is credibility. You are a company several years old and you try to sell something to a company who is 100 years old and have like generations of
varies.
people and building materials.
Yeah,
So to lower the trust barrier,
yeah,
we offer companies paid pilots. So like and we decided how to work. That's let's say you have a one product line, and we tell you, okay, let's make a product line and let's ingest the whole product line
yeah,
and we will train it. We will work with you in the loop. We will hand it over to you, and you stress test it as much as you can, and you try to break it. And this is how we actually build trust with the company.
yeah,
And we give like a symbolic prices just to cover our cost to prepare for them. And
sure.
this is the part where if we proceed and continue to build actually the whole contract, they get discounted that paid pilot. So they get that money
Yeah,
like reimbursed basically.
yeah.
And
The ROI is there, 100%. Yeah,
yes, and then we set up key metrics, what they want to follow. Every company wants to follow different stuff, like a speed of resolution of the ticket with the AI versus a human, or
mm-hmm.
how deep knowledge goes. And we have like a small questionnaire, which is pretty simple. It's like one thing is, are you going to build the AI that is faced internally for your sales and support teams? Or externally for visitors to self-serve.
Yeah,
Most of the companies want to use it internally because they want to help their employees be more efficient and close more deals.
yeah,
Because what we discovered is when somebody comes to the website, they just ask um, not that good questions. Not the quality of question is like half baked without a context, and
absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
and then they bounce and they say, yeah, your tool doesn't work. Well, when we look at the logs, we see the questions are, of course, if that question comes to a real person, they will ask, yeah, but tell me more. Like, what is the product? Like, give me more context, so then I can give you the answer.
yeah,
In this case, people often bounce faster because they think it's a bot. So that's one thing. The other thing is like, how many product lines do you have? It's not the same if you have like a one product line or 1,000 product lines.
yeah,
And then the third one is actually in one product line, how many folders and files do you have? because it's not the same if I have like one product line and 10,000 files, or
Right.
I have 100 product lines, each one file. It's completely
Exactly.
different picture.
100%. Yep.
And fourth is the question about the data and the knowledge base, how structured it is. And
Yeah.
based on that, we give you assessment. We're super transparent, and we say X amount of dollars is to go with your product line to do a paid pilot and to establish KPIs.
Yeah.
And then it can be between 4 to 8 weeks. And why I say this range, it's because how involved is the other party. So we had a situation where they designated 3 people. One is the one point of contact, and two more people who are going to test the tool. And for 2 weeks, they didn't even test it. And we're like, well, you can't expect KPIs and perform and to see how a tool is performing when you are not using it.
100%. I mean, and that's a that's a story for many organizations, really. You always
Yeah,
have some kind of tech adoption happen, and the true adoption internally ends up being like, and it's because it gets in the way of, and it's not about getting in the way, but it's more so people are used to patterns, right? And for some that
mhm,
where they might find themselves on an autopilot to some degree, they
yep,
just find that their proficiency gets to that degree. But I imagine that that's exactly where organizations start developing a better understanding and where their gaps really are, or how they can, revitalize these things.
yep.
Because
Actually,
fundament,
actually,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, actually, our tool helps them identify knowledge gaps.
exactly.
Like
Yeah,
that's one of the features that we have, and
yeah,
we send you a monthly report
yeah,
where we tell you like, hey, a lot of people in your team were asking about specific information regarding specific product.
yeah,
Maybe you should make a training material for that. Or
exactly.
maybe your team is reporting that architects are asking about specific information about certain product. Maybe
Yeah,
your marketing team should create something on that topic so people can find it easily.
yeah. To me, it surprises me, and I'm someone who comes from the software world, but very quickly as I got more proficient in full stack development, realized there was more value in understanding why we're doing the things that we're doing. And
Yep.
software development unfortunately doesn't answer that question. You have to go into like user research to find out. And
Yep.
and and it blows my mind that and what's blowing my mind more now in a good way is that the realization that research was actually lacking in a lot of organizations is becoming very clear,
Yep.
and to not have that function like emphasize its value for how you operate more efficiently, what you're doing surfaces that even more so. And what's
Yep.
great is that we've gotten to the point in the technology where, and I've seen with how you've built your product, that you create immediate feedback loops for the team to
Mhm.
address, instead of it being like a function where you think, oh, no, we need the right people to interpret this information. Like, no, like the people in your
Yep.
company today are going to be the ones best suited to do this. And the tool is
Yep.
just there to augment them. And so, yeah. Well, this is very exciting.
In most cases, you don't have to hire more people to maybe serve more customers. You can
Yeah,
do it with the same team with a lot of automations. And
yeah,
especially in our industry, building material manufacturing, that's a lot of money.
totally. I mean, with the manufacturers I work with today, and with what I'm, building alongside here, and how we're partnering up with all these different touch points, that's the realization I'm having. Teams are
Yep.
they are funded, they have funding there, or maybe they're getting also revenue on top of the funding. Most
Mhm.
cases, it's the two of them. Right now,
Yep.
barely anyone is really getting funding if you don't have the other two, unless you really sold someone into some AI stuff that blew them away. But I think that's also fading away a little bit more faster now.
Yep.
But pre-revenue is really its own segment. But like, yeah, in this world of manufacturing, especially in the building product space, it very much comes down to that. And a lot of these teams are trying to be a lot more nimble. And I'm
Yep.
realizing from the investors too, they realize that the go-to-market side is where, for one, what I'm also noticing is that there is a better manufacturer investor alignment. So
Yep.
manufacturers are being very careful who they're raising from, to be sure that a part of the raise is actually not just the capital, but the network. And so it ends
So
up being
smart
more,
money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, back to that phrase. Exactly. And so there's a lot more of that for sure, in that sense. And it's nice to see that there's more appetite for the physical world now too.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
definitely.
I think we were a lot into the SaaS world, and as an investor looking at like, better returns, like the SaaS return formula has always been like, something any investor would be like, great, this is like better
Yeah.
than the public market for one, so why not? But now it's more the realization that hardware might become the next thing in that. So we'll keep our eyes open there for sure.
Yeah, and especially what I believe regarding the smaller companies, what
Yeah,
investors are looking is that, are you coming from the domain? Like if
yeah,
you are having domain expertise, that means that, for example, in my case, I actually felt the pain or going through documents
yeah,
and like trying to call people and trying
yeah,
to figure out that information. It's just waste of time and it's frustrated, and you know that it's nagging you that you need to find out a specific product. And if you feel the pain, like for example, when I'm speaking with manufacturers,
yeah,
I already know what questions to ask them, and in 80% can expect the answer, what is going to be the outcome.
yeah,
And I mean, we are really deep into this matter and the niche. And
yeah.
honestly, I want to just nail down this niche and do just that.
Yeah. Well, there's enough to it. There are lots of
Yeah.
products that keep coming up, and there are there are different stakeholders now who are inquiring about products too. And
Oh yeah.
I think if we want to use this medium as a signal producing venture in terms of this being media that's useful, it's definitely worth realizing that your future homeowner could be a bigger stakeholder than you realize too, or the future occupant actually has a
Yeah.
somewhat of a higher say than we might realize. And it's very interesting to see that shape out too. Um, but yeah, well, we'll definitely be staying in tune. And as we thank anyone who joined us, and for anyone who checks the recording later, definitely, however this was useful. I definitely think, the fundamentally here we're talking about supporting teams with their restructuring. It's very important for manufacturers to realize that a big part of, companies that do this kind of work, like with Lucid, they made it very clear their business model is centered around value add. So that's very important to realize, because it fundamentally becomes about sort of how we actually uh, go through the act of actually improving our operations without it being a huge cost, right?
Yes.
And at that point, the ROI speaks for itself. And so, yeah, well, for anyone checking this out, we worked out a deal here, so you can sign up here for a free pilot for one product line.
Yep.
So Marco will definitely be, and their team have been very graceful. So we thank you for this generosity on this part,
Yeah, no
to
worries.
look into it. Yeah, but it's very important, and it's highly recommended for sure.
Yeah. I
Um,
would I would add maybe that, so for the building material manufacturers watching this, we will open 3 spots for a free pilot for testing on the product line. Of course, we will talk and discuss how best to approach this test. And for people watching this who are not in this industry and they are thinking how to implement AI into their workflows, day-to-day processes, I'm open to do like a completely free consultation and brainstorming to understand their process of how they operate, and then suggest some solutions that could be easily adaptable. So that's for the viewers of this stream.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you're into this. You've been, it's not like you just suddenly learned about AI and you're like, oh, this could work. You've
No.
been so, and yeah, and there's one thing that, you've always stayed top of mind in terms of how even, I've ventured around through this ecosystem. I've always been fascinated by your past projects. Like you've gone into hardware, you've tinkered with all sorts of like gadgets, and so you always have this like, so I always found that cool about you, in terms of like the yeah, product
Thanks.
mindset. So that's
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
cool. Well, we thank everyone who joined, and yeah, we'll have a lot of content shaped up with this recording as well. But yeah,